So once you've pieced all your blocks, 4x4, you'll want to quilt. So onto the quilting. Baste up your 3 layers, as I said in the tutorial, and then it's your choice whether you hand quilt or machine quilt. I put a link in the newsletter for a machine quilting tutorial that I did a while ago for concentric circles, and I thought that would look quite nice coming out from the centre on the machine. Or, as I've done, you can hand quilt your piece, and the following tutorial shows you how to use big stitch quilting, my favourite, to sew around all the curves and then do a cross hatch pattern using a Hera marker. So I've marked my lines on my quilt using a Hera marker. Now if you haven't seen one of these before, this is mine. I haven't got them in the shop at the moment, but you can get them online. It's basically a plastic shape with a sharp edge at one end, very sharp side edge, which means that you can run that along a ruler and it will mark the fabric in a kind of a dent shape. Then when you sew over it, it will disappear. So it's better than a pen. Well, I don't like pens or pencils myself, but this is great. So invest in one of these if you can. So see the next tutorial on how to hand quilt your wall hanging. Right, so as you can see, I've constructed my table runner in this design. You've got 16 grandmother fan blocks in all, so 4x4, so 4 rows, 4 blocks of 4 rows. And then, as you can see in the instructions, it tells you how to pin them properly together to match those seams, and well, to match those seams, but to match those seams as well, with pins. So check your written instructions for that. So once you've attached your borders, press all the seams outwards and then press the top from the front, so it's all nice and flat. And then we get to baste it. So I've got just a piece of white calico, wadding about half an inch bigger than the top. Lay all that flat, press it all out, and then my favourite method of basting everything really on small projects to basting quilts is curved safety pins. So start from the beginning, from the middle, sorry, and just go through all layers and baste approximately 2 inches apart. If you would rather, you can, if you're going to hand quilt this and it might take a while, you can thread baste it. So first I would put these pins in and then get long thread, completely different colour from your top, and then just do long running stitches across and down in a grid kind of pattern, and then take your pins out, and then you won't have your pins being left in for ages making holes. So just carry on basting. Right, so when you've got all your pins in, you've got a fully basted project to quilt. Right, so to quilt my hanging, I'm going to hand quilt it, and I'm going to use Aurifil's 12 weight neutral, I think this is called, 2311. This is available in the shop. Online there's a big one and a small one. Small one will probably be enough for this project. So I'm using an embroidery needle actually. A lot of people ask me what needles I use for quilting. John James, definitely, but what size it is I have no idea because my needles get a bit mixed up, shall we say. But what I suggest is, if you want to have a go, get a selection pack of embroidery needles or quilting needles and sharps actually when it comes to piecing. Get a selection pack and see which one suits you, and then try and work out. There is a good guide on the John James website of the sizes, so you could try and figure out what size you like and what it is, and work out what size it is. So anyway, but have a play, everyone's different. And also when it comes to a thimble, this is my cheapy plastic thimble which suits me down to the ground. It's cheap, it's on the line, it's on the website again, worth a go. I like it because it's not absolutely enclosed, you can still, your fingers still breathe. Yeah, and it's quite hard, so your needle hits against that hardness on the top. Okay, so to start with, I've cut about an 18-inch length of cotton. Put a knot in the end of it. So again, I've shown this before, but put your thread on top of your forefinger, a needle on top of that, wrap the thread 2 or 3 times around the needle, and hold the needle tight with the thread in between your fingers and pull it all the way to the end. And if it doesn't get caught on pins, you will have a nice knot at the end. Okay, so to start quilting, I'm going to quilt first around the centre of this seam here. So I'm not going to quilt the fans themselves, as I've explained in the instructions. I've chosen to go around each ring, and then I'm going to do a cross hatch in the negative space. You can obviously quilt as you wish. You could go around all the seams, all the individual shapes, echo quilt them, or you could go around the inside and outside of all the rings. You could do a little heart in the middle of these negative spaces. It's absolutely up to you. So, and I would love to see what you do. So to start off with, I'm going to start on the back. So what I do is I gather, so I've got long fingers, I gather the quilt and go to where I want to start, and then and my thumb's there, and then I bring the needle up about 1 inch away from where I want to start, and then give it a little tug. Oh, yes, as I said, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. This calico is quite a tight weave, so you might have trouble like I just did. Let's try that again. So just give it a little tug, and then as you can see, it buries itself in the wadding. So you can then bring it up to where you want to start, which is about 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch away from that seam. So then I'm going to start there, and I'm just going to do a big running stitch. So go through all the 3 layers. If you can't manage it on some of the 3 layers, it doesn't matter, it's a wall hanging, nobody's going to see the back. If you do really want to have the back stitches as neat as the front, this method probably isn't the best way to do it. I would get a hoop and do more of a stabbing motion, so you're going back and forth through for each stitch, and then you should be able to, that takes a lot of practice, to be honest, because you have to feel underneath as well to make sure you're getting a nice even stitch at the back. I'm not that fussed, to be honest. I would rather the front look as beautiful as it can. So as I say, just carry on. You can do 1 stitch at a time, you can do 2 or 3 if you're confident. The important bit is to just try and get them as evenly sized as possible, so the spaces in between and the stitch itself should be the same size. If it's not, it's not the end of the world. It comes with practice. So just pull them through. So obviously with a small project you can move it around as you wish, and then keep going on. Obviously move the pins out of the way when you get to them. And then you can use this thumb then to push the fabric down so your needle comes up against it. So your hands, both of your hands are working in conjunction with each other. So this one is pushing, so you can see I'm pushing the end of the needle with my thimble, and my thumb is used at the front to pull it back through. So when you come to the end of that line, take your thread through to the back. If you were going to quilt then somewhere nearer, I would then carry the thread across to the point where I want, the next point where I want to be. But in my case, I'm actually going to do all the circles first, so my next line will be the outside. So I'm going to take it through to the back, And then you want to do a knot. So if you hold your thread, it's like a French knot, kind of. If you wrap your thread around as close to the fabric as you can, hold that close and then pull it through again, then you'll get a knot on your thread again, and then pull that where you came out, but not to the front, just into the wadding. Bring it out, and then hopefully you can pull it through. Okay, if you do find that's a bit hard to pull through, you probably haven't gone through the wadding and your hole's not big enough, so just take it out and do it again, because you will tear the thread and then you're left with a little tail that you don't want. Or you could just do a couple of stitches on top of each other to lock the thread. That's fine, because this is a wall hanging. There you go, and then you just cut the thread as close to the fabric as possible, and you can do that little tail as well at the beginning. So as you can see, my stitches aren't obvious on the back, but as I said, I'm not that bothered about the back. So there you go, so there's your first line of quilting. So that's quilted now, so you can take that pin out. So I'm going to continue to quilt around the edges of all my rings and the inner bits, and then we'll come back to the cross hatching. Right, so as you can see, I've quilted around all the inner and the outer circles of my fans. So now I'm going to do a cross hatch in the negative spaces. So I'm going to use my Hera marker, or you can use, if you've got a reliable removable pen or pencil, then you can use that. I prefer not to put marks on my quilts other than with this, but it's up to you. You can use a friction pen, but they've got their worries. So again, I use a Hera marker, which is a sharp edge that will crease or dent your fabric, I suppose. So I'm going to start my first line directly diagonally across the quilt. So use your quilter's ruler to line up the points, and then press down with your Hera. And as you can see, I've got a nice line across the fabric to follow in my sewing. So then I'm going to quilt my lines. What should we do? Should we do an inch apart? Yeah, an inch apart. So if you then line up that first line with the inch line on your ruler, and do another line. So I'm not marking over the stitching lines or over the fans, I'm just going in the negative space. Okay, so if we carry on that space, that line, and then if we flip it round the other way, then we can do the other side. Those lines that are marked in the fabric. So if you just rub that, or once you've stitched over it, it will disappear. So I'm going to start there in the centre and do these lines first. Bring your needle up at the line. So I'm going to try and not go over other lines of stitches. So this was obviously just a straight line running stitch, but when we go over this way, I'm going to try and do a sort of a sashiko type effect. So we'll see how Right, so as you can see, I've done all those diagonal lines, all 1 inch apart. So use your ruler to mark all the lines and embroider and quilt them. And then we're going to do the one in the opposite direction. So we're doing exactly the same thing as before. Just take your quilter's ruler and go through that centre diagonal with your hero marker or pencil or whatever you prefer to use. And then, so we've done the central one, so we'll do a couple more the other way. So line up that first inch line with that centre point and then mark the lines. Okay, so I'll stop there for now so we can start quilting. So as I said at the beginning, I'm going to do this as a kind of a sashiko effect, I think, which means I'm not going to stitch over the line. So when I meet a line, I'm going to go under it so that they don't meet. So we'll see how this works. I've secured the thread at the back and we're going to do this line here. Okay, so again, just a small running stitch. But when you come to this line here, go under it rather than over it. Like so. So I hope you've enjoyed making your wall hanging. Once you've quilted it, trim it down so it's nice and square and attach your binding. As ever, there's a binding tutorial on my website under the Beginner's Quilt series if you need a reminder, and that is machine sewing, I'm afraid. Okay, so I would love to see your projects. Please share them on social media, or if you're not on there, send me a couple of pics via email to louisa@sewmotion.com, and I will be doing a gallery later in the month, or maybe in March when the second one comes out. That's a good idea. I'll make this up as I go along. Anyway, enjoy your projects, have fun. Remember, it is fun. Don't get stressed. If you do get stressed, put it aside for a bit, come back to it. It's fine. It doesn't go anywhere. I hope this also sees you through lockdown. Please stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you soon. Bye.